June 25th Korean War imposed untold misfortune and death on the Korean people. Who started the Korean War? Who is the mastermind of the war? Here are historical facts and materials giving an answer to these questions. A secret report prepared by the Bureau of Intelligence and Research of the U.S. Department of State reads, because of Korea's geographic position in northeastern Asia, control over Korea and over the minds of its people is advantageous to any power with Far Eastern interests. Politically, Korea's importance to the United States is open to less dispute. Long ago, the United States identified Korea as a forward base for realizing its strategy for world supremacy and as a bridge to the continent, calling it a dagger with which to cut the Asian continent. The United States started its invasion against Korea with an intrusion of General Sherman, an aggressor ship, in 1866, and through the Katsura-Taft Agreement in 1905, it actively instigated and helped the Japanese imperialists in their invasion of Korea. Towards the close of the Second World War, the United States worked out in a cunning way a plan to divide Korea along the 38th parallel. On September 8, 1945, the U.S. troops landed on Incheon under the guise of liberator and occupied the whole southern half of Korea. Since the occupation of South Korea, the United States enforced cruel military rule. Commander of the U.S. forces in South Korea, Juche, declared, "The sole government of South Korea is the military government established at the order of the Supreme Commander of the U.S. Army. The military government replaces the Japanese military government." After declaring the military government, the United States extensively increased the South Korean police force and directed its primary attention to training cannon fodder for an upcoming war against the north of Korea. Since its occupation of South Korea, the United States disbanded the People's Committees in all parts by force of arms and banned the activities of all democratic parties and public organizations in South Korea. As the military government faced the strong resistance of the South Korean people, it attempted to rig up a puppet regime in order to realize the ambition for aggression. It suppressed with arms the struggle of the people against the separate elections slated for May 10, 1948, and cobbled together a puppet regime through violence and fraud, ruthlessly trampling down the desire of all the Korean people for the reunification of their country. After setting up the puppet regime, the United States began to put spurs to war preparations. While extensively increasing the number of the South Korean army, it forced the South Korean government to enact a military service law in order to secure a large reserve force. According to the law, many young and middle-aged people in the urban and rural areas were drafted and given military training. It also handed over a large amount of military supplies, including military hardware necessary for war, to the South Korean army under the name of aid. Entering 1949, it formed the U.S. Military Advisory Office in every division, regiment and battalion of the South Korean Army and completely grasped all command rights, including training and operations. Under the patronage of the United States, Japan too was rapidly changed into an offensive base, repair base, and logistics base for a war in Korea. Air and naval bases were rebuilt or built at important strategic points, including Yokosuka, Kure, and Sapporo. And major heavy industrial factories and manufactories were turned into munitions repairing and assembling factories. Serious economic crisis swept the United States in 1948 and 1949. In order to get rid of the crisis, the U.S. monopoly plutocrats demanded a shock therapy from the White House, which in turn decided to present them with the Korean War as a gift. From the autumn of 1949, visits to South Korea by the U.S. political and military bigwigs became more frequent. In those days, the United States worked out an operations map of war and mobilized the South Korean puppet troops for more undisguised armed incursions and provocations. In 1949 alone, they made 2,617 armed incursions and provocations, 8 on a daily average. These figures prove their extreme frenzy for invasion of the North. In mid-February 1950, MacArthur called Syngman Rhee to Tokyo for secret talks. At the talks, he gave the South Korean puppet 11-point instructions on unleashing a Korean War before July. Syngman Rhee sent a letter to his political advisor Oliver in Washington. The letter reads, "I feel strongly that now is the most psychological moment when we should take an aggressive measure." On June 17, 1950, Dulles flew in South Korea as a special envoy of the U.S. President so as to finally examine war preparations and confirm the date and time of the war. On June 19th, he showed up at the South Korean National Assembly and said the United States was ready to render all mental and material aids necessary for fighting the North of Korea. Leaving Seoul, Dulles left a letter to Syngman Rhee. "I attach great importance to the decisive role which your country can play in the great drama that is unfolding." In this way, he disclosed the scheme of the United States. Coming to Tokyo, Dulles had 4-man secret talks with Johnson, Bradley, and MacArthur, who were standing by in the MacArthur's command, and decided on igniting the Korean War on June 25, 1950. Roberts, chief of the American Military Advisory Group, said to Syngman Rhee, "We have chosen the 25th, and this explains our prudence. It is Sunday. It's the Sabbath for both the United States and South Korea, Christian states. No one will believe we have started a war on Sunday." According to secret directives, planes began to be unveiled in the hangars and more bombers and fighters were sent to the U.S. Air Force in Japan. Pilots under the U.S. Far Eastern Forces were on standby, and an emergency alert order was issued to all units of the South Korean Army along the 38th parallel. Some hours before the start of the war, the families of the U.S. officers were secretly sent to Japan by a Norwegian ship. But the people of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea were spending June 24th Saturday as an ordinary day. At 4 a.m. on June 25, 1950, the South Korean Puppet Army, at the instigation of the United States, started an all-out attack on the DPRK, and by taking advantage of temporary ascendancy, intruded 2 kilometers north of the 38th parallel. In a book he wrote later, MacArthur confessed, "The Army of the North was deployed for defense, not for attack." That's why the world people unanimously denounced that both the 38th parallel and the Korean War were products of the United States. The Korean War was precisely a direct product of the aggressive foreign policy of the United States to dominate the world, and the premeditated war it unleashed on the basis of detailed preparations.